West Anatolia, 1281. A 24-year-old man just inherited an empire. Except it wasn't an empire. It was 16 kilometers of land. 16. You could walk across it in an afternoon. And yet, 600 years later, the state this man built was still standing. Every neighboring kingdom that looked down on those 16 kilometers, the Byzantines, the Mongols, the Seljuks who thought they owned him, all of them gone, erased. His name was Osman, and he never once declared himself independent. That's the part nobody explains, because the answer changes everything you think you know about how empires are actually built. To understand how a man with 16 kilometers builds something that lasts 6 centuries, you need to understand what he chose never to become. Anatolia, 1281. His father, Ertugrul, had just died. Ertugrul was not a conqueror. He was a careful man, a tribal leader who accepted land from the Seljuk Sultan and never asked for more than he was given. He built slowly, quietly, and when he died, he left Osman something more valuable than territory, a reputation for loyalty. Osman was 24 years old. The land he inherited sat on the western edge of Anatolia, a thin strip of territory pressed directly against the Byzantine frontier. To his east, the decaying Seljuk Sultanate, itself a puppet of the Mongol Ilkhanate in Tabriz. To his west, Byzantine fortresses, centuries old, built to last forever. He was surrounded, outnumbered. Technically, a subordinate of a crumbling empire. Imagine you are Osman in that moment. 24 years old, a handful of horsemen at your back, a Byzantine fortress visible on the horizon, and every powerful ruler in the region either ignoring you or waiting for you to make a mistake. If he moved too fast, the Seljuks would crush him. If he moved too slow, the Byzantines would swallow his land before he built anything worth defending. He had one path, and it required a kind of patience most men in his position never had the discipline to hold. He chose that path. But he had no idea that the first test of that patience was already marching toward him, wearing the face of an opportunity that could just as easily become a trap. The city was called Eskişehir. It sat in the valley like a locked door, fortified walls, stone towers, the smell of cold mountain air cutting through the dust every morning. The Byzantines had held it for generations. It was not a soft target, it was a statement. Taking it would mean nothing strategically. The walls would still stand, the Byzantines would still be there. But Osman understood something the military strategists around him did not. He didn't need to win a war. He needed people to hear his name. 1288, 7 years after inheriting 16 kilometers of nothing, Osman took Eskişehir. The news moved through Anatolia faster than any army. Turkic horsemen who had been drifting between dying principalities, soldiers looking for a leader worth following, they turned their horses west, toward Osman. But soldiers alone don't build a state. Osman understood that too. A Sufi scholar named Debali led a brotherhood in the region, the Akis, craftsmen and traders organized into guilds, bound together by a code of hospitality so precise that the traveler, Ibn Battuta, would later write about it with something close to disbelief. He wrote that nowhere in the world had he seen men more eager to feed strangers and ask for nothing. Osman didn't just recruit them. He married Debali's daughter because he knew an army takes land, but a people, craftsmen, traders, farmers, scholars, Sufi brotherhoods, a people holds it. His principality was filling with riders who wanted glory, mystics who wanted purpose, and craftsmen who wanted stability. 3 groups, 3 different needs, one man holding all of them together with something rarer than military talent, judgment. Osman had 2 choices at this moment: consolidate what he had, or push further into Byzantine territory while the momentum was real. He chose to push, and that decision would change everything. Before we continue, if this story is landing for you, hit subscribe. It genuinely helps us make more of this. Now, back to Osman. 1299. Bilecik, a Byzantine city. Stone walls, iron gates. The kind of fortress that ends careers of men who attack it unprepared. Osman took it. And this time, the news didn't just reach the Turkic horsemen. It reached the Seljuk Sultan himself. Ala al-Din Kaykubad III, the Sultan, had a problem. Osman was getting too strong to be ignored, but not strong enough to be safely destroyed. So the Sultan made a calculation. He sent Osman the symbols of a provincial ruler, banners, robes, the formal markers of recognized authority, not as a reward, as a leash. The Sultan's logic was clear. If Osman was going to become powerful anyway, better to give him a title and bind him to the Seljuk name before he took a title for himself. Osman accepted, and then did exactly what he was going to do anyway. 1302. Bursa, the greatest Byzantine city in northwestern Anatolia. Walls so thick the stones seemed to absorb sound. Towers so high they vanished into the morning fog. Osman marched on it. On the plains outside the city, at a place called Baphius, the Byzantine army came out to meet him. They expected to stop him there. They didn't. Osman shattered their formation, sent them retreating behind the walls, stood at the edge of the field looking up at the city that hadn't fallen yet. And he said to his commanders, steady, unhurried, we are not finished with Bursa. He began the siege. Months passed, then years. The walls did not break. Osman did not leave. Because here is what the Byzantines inside those walls didn't understand. Osman wasn't trying to break the walls. He was making it impossible for anything to reach them. No food came in from the north. He had taken the port of Mudanya in 1321, the first sea access the Ottoman Principality had ever held. No reinforcements came from the east. The Seljuks had collapsed completely by 1306. Their last sultan, Masud II, dead. The dynasty finished. No help came from the Mongols. Their Ilkhanate, nominally in charge of everything, held nothing real. Bursa was not being attacked. Bursa was being quietly, patiently, surgically cut off from the rest of the world. One supply line at a time. 1326. Osman ibn Ertugrul died at 69. He did not live to see Bursa fall, but he knew it would fall. He had made certain of that before the fever took him. His son Orhan received the news of Bursa's surrender the same year his father died. Some historians believe Osman heard the news before he closed his eyes. Others say the timing was coincidence. Either way, Bursa fell. And here is the number that makes every other number irrelevant. At the moment of Osman's death, his principality measured 16 kilometers. 16. The same 16 kilometers he had inherited 45 years earlier from a man who was himself a minor subordinate of a dying empire. Western historians looked at that number and drew a conclusion. Will Durant, one of the most celebrated historians of the 20th century, wrote that Osman was not a great leader, just persistent, just patient. Durant measured greatness the way most people measure it. Territory, titles, visible conquest. But the Ottoman state that Osman handed to Orhan did not measure 16 kilometers for much longer. Within a generation, it consumed Bursa. Within 2 generations, it crossed into Europe. Within 3, Constantinople itself fell. The state Osman built lasted 600 years. 600 years. Because he didn't build territory. He built a people. Turkic warriors who wanted a purpose. Sufi brotherhoods who wanted a home. Christian craftsmen who were treated with enough fairness that they stayed. And over decades, many of them converted and became the fabric of the new society. No forced displacement, no ethnic purge, no burning of what he conquered. He absorbed, he incorporated. He made the conquered feel that the conquest was somehow also theirs. That is not the strategy of a patient man waiting for luck. That is architecture, state architecture. The rarest kind. But there is something underneath all of this that the history books rarely say directly. Something that explains not just how Osman built a state, but why it held together when everything around it collapsed. Look at the map of Anatolia in 1300. Osman was not the only Turkish ruler. He was not the strongest. He was not the richest. He was not the most militarily powerful. There were larger principalities. There were rulers with more land, more soldiers, more resources. Every single one of them is gone. Why? The answer begins with a word the chroniclers use to describe Osman that gets lost in translation. Zahid. It means someone who holds the world loosely, who accumulates and gives away, who fights and keeps nothing for himself. The medieval historian Al-Asami described Osman this way. He left behind no gold, no stored wealth, only a sword, a coat of armor, some horses, and a flock of sheep kept for feeding guests. That's what he owned at 69, after 45 years of conquest. Now compare that to the princes of the neighboring Turkish states, men who built walls around their wealth, who taxed their own soldiers, who treated loyalty as something to be purchased, and therefore could always be outbid. Osman couldn't be outbid, because he wasn't paying anyone. People followed him because following him felt like something other than employment. It felt like meaning. And here is the deepest irony. The Mongol Ilkhanate, the empire that technically claimed authority over every ruler in this region, including Osman, had converted to Islam in 1295. Their leader, Mahmud Ghazan, made it official. They were now, on paper, part of the same religious world as Osman. But the Ilkhanate collapsed anyway, because conversion alone doesn't create loyalty. Conversion without character is just a new flag on the same rotten structure. Osman never flew a flag of borrowed legitimacy. He built legitimacy one decision at a time, one city, one alliance, one marriage, one gesture of restraint when every instinct around him screamed to take more. That is why 16 kilometers became 600 years. We started with 16 kilometers. You might have assumed this was a story about military genius, or religious conquest, or the right man at the right time. It wasn't. It was a story about restraint. Osman looked at the collapsing world around him in 1281, the Seljuks dissolving, the Mongols hollowing out everything they touched, the Byzantines fortified but rotting from within, and made a decision that almost no one in his position ever makes. He refused to hurry. He died at 69, 45 years of leadership, and the city he spent the last 2 decades surrounding, he never saw it fall, but it fell. Because the structures he built, the alliances, the guilds, the culture of giving over keeping, the loyalty that couldn't be bought because it was never for sale, those structures continued without him. His son carried it. His son's sons carried it further. 600 years of carrying. Will Durant was wrong. Patience is not the consolation prize for men who couldn't be great. Sometimes patience is the greatness. But Osman was not the last man in this story. 40 years after his death, his grandson would stand at the edge of a different sea, facing a wall that hadn't fallen in 1,000 years. And he would make a gamble so precise, so cold, so mathematically certain in his mind, that the men around him thought he had lost his reason. They were wrong too. And that story is larger than this one.